Welcome to the Gay Buddhist Forum, where teachers from all schools of Buddhism offer their perspectives on the Dharma and its application in modern times, especially for LGBTQI audiences. These talks are offered freely to the world and made possible by appreciative listeners. If you would like to support our efforts to share the Dharma with underserved audiences, please visit gaybuddhist.org. There you can donate, find a list of upcoming speakers, or enjoy many hundreds of these recorded talks dating back to 1996.
It's our custom to go around and introduce ourselves. Risha. I'm George.
My name is Stephen.
I'm Tony.
Matthew.
Susan.
Oh.
Michael.
Peter.
I'm Joe.
My name is Joe.
I'm Richard.
Don.
Bob.
Bob.
My name is Jerry.
My name is Jeff. I'm Clint.
My name is Douglas.
Jack. Larry. I'm Brad.
My name is Andre. Jason.
You know.
My name is Cass.
Laura.
I'll introduce Laura Burges, a lay entrusted Buddhist teacher in the SotoZen tradition, lectures and leads retreats at different practice centers in Northern California. A teacher of children for over 30 years, she trains other teachers to bring mindfulness practice into elementary classrooms. Laura co-founded the Sangha and Recovery program at Zen Center and has a particular interest in the intersection of Buddhism and recovery. She is the abiding teacher at the Lenox House Meditation Group in Oakland. Thank you.
Thank you, Krishna. I'm so happy to be here. I always love coming here, so thank you for inviting me back. I've been invited to give 2 talks, so this will be the first part of the talk. And what I'd like to share with you is teaching on the 8 awarenesses of an awakened person. And this is from the Mahaparinirvana Sutra, and it was the last teaching of Dogen Zenji's before he died. Dogen was a 12th century monk in Japan who went to China and brought Chan, or Zen, back to Japan. So I'm part of the SotoZen lineage, and he is one of our beloved ancestors. So the translation of the Buddha's words in the sutra come from Dogen Zenji in his book, the Shobogenzo. So that's the source of the material I'll be sharing with you today. And the main one I'm going to focus on today of these awarenesses is knowing how to be satisfied. Although, as the great American philosopher Mae West said, too much of a good thing is wonderful. So I want to share these 8 awarenesses with you. And I'll just take a pause in between each one so we can let them sink in a bit. The 8 awarenesses of an awakened person. Having few desires, knowing how to be satisfied, enjoying serenity and tranquility, exerting meticulous effort, not forgetting right thought, practicing samadhi, cultivating wisdom, and avoiding idle talk. If you think about these 8 awarenesses, they reverberate and fold back on one another. So if we have few desires, and I want to digress a minute and say, sometimes people feel that Buddhism is about annihilating all desire. And I really think that's a misunderstanding. If we had absolutely no desire, why would we get up in the morning, you know? For me, it's more a question of transforming unwholesome desires into wholesome desires. And as a person in recovery, this was essential to me to totally recalibrate the way that I look at the world and find satisfaction and joy in places other than substances or behaviors. Having few desires. If we have few desires, then we know how to be satisfied. If we know how to be satisfied, then we can enjoy serenity and tranquility because we're not always grasping for the next thing. And if we're serene and tranquil, we're more able to exert meticulous effort. In the midst of exerting meticulous effort, it's important that we remember right thought. And you'll know that right thought is part of the Noble Eightfold Path, right thought. And the three aspects of right thought is remembering that we're not, it's usually called no self. What that really means is that we're not alone, that we are deeply interconnected with all beings. There is no me without you. The very floor that we stand on was created by someone for us, and we're breathing the air from the trees, and we're seeing one another and allowing our words and the sight of one another into our own bodies in this very intimate way. Part of right thought is understanding the teachings of no self, of interconnectedness, the reality of suffering. I don't think any of us can deny that there's suffering in life. And the reality of impermanence. This is the truth that everything changes, except Jennifer Aniston. I have to say that. She never changes. Practicing samadhi is what we did together today. A state of concentration, gathering the mind and becoming one with one another. And I feel like when we practice samadhi, when we meditate with each other, we're realizing these 8 awarenesses, because we are sitting still, not grasping, not jumping up and running out the minute we want to, although we may want to. Practicing samadhi is a kind of realization of these awarenesses. Cultivating wisdom, which we do through one another, in our Sangha, through the Dharma, the teachings of Buddha, and just of our observations of the world. I was speaking to a scientist the other night. He's interested in, is Buddhism as a religion? What is it? And I said, well, it's very scientific. We're not really asked to believe anything in Buddhism that we can't verify for ourselves. And I understand the Dalai Lama is very aligned with scientific discoveries, and he was at a conference once, but he kind of disappeared and nobody knew where he'd gone. Well, he'd gone to watch on TV some space launch because he's fascinated with science. So Buddhism is not counter to science. And finally, avoiding idle talk. This one is kind of hard for me because I love idle talk. I remember Elvis Roosevelt supposedly said, if you can't think of anything nice to say, come sit down right over there next to me. So that's something I have to be careful about. This is what the Buddha's words, knowing how much to take of what one already has is called knowing how to be satisfied. Knowing how much to take of what one already has is called knowing how to be satisfied. The Buddha says, you monks should contemplate knowing how to be satisfied if you wish to be liberated from suffering. The dharma of knowing how to be satisfied is the realm of riches, comfort, peace, and tranquility. Those who know how to be satisfied are happy and satisfied even when sleeping on the ground. Those who do not know how to be satisfied are not satisfied, even when dwelling in a heavenly palace. Those who do not know how to be satisfied are poor, even if they are wealthy, while those who know how to be satisfied are wealthy, even though they have little. Those who do not know how to be satisfied and are always tempted by desires are consoled by those who know how to be satisfied. This is called knowing how to be satisfied. For me, this teaching gets right to the heart of our ordinary, everyday suffering, this very human and understandable suffering of always wanting things to be a little bit different than the way they are. In Sanskrit, the word for suffering is tanha, which literally means thirst. And this is the kind of craving that causes our suffering. In the four, I'm sure you've heard of the 4 Noble Truths in the course of these gatherings. Tanha, or thirst. So always being thirsty for more. We tend to think we could be truly happy, truly satisfied. If only we could make a few minor adjustments, then we'd be happy, you know. Being able to be satisfied with what we already have depends on our not taking our life for granted and to be grateful every day for every breath. Ed Brown, you may know of him as a Buddhist teacher in our lineage. He wrote the Talsara Bread book and teaches widely. And he said once, if you're not happy with what you have, what makes you think you'd be happy with more? And I really took that to heart. If we can't be contented and happy and see the riches right before us, what makes us think that even more would do the trick? Personally, I think it's when we're going through great difficulty and reversals in our lives, when we have the ability to find joy in seemingly small things. When we're going through a hard time, just the sight of a small tree decorated with cherry blossoms can cause us to take an in-breath of joy. I remember when my stepmother was dying of cancer, she asked me for a glass of water, and I handed it to her, and she took a sip, and she looked at me and she said, I never knew before how good a glass of water tasted. And this just pierced my heart, that at the end of her life, this very simple thing, someone who loved her handing her a glass of water and her being able to drink it, was the whole world for her in that moment. And what we don't know is we have access to that every day, every moment. We have access to that ourselves. I've shared this with you before, but it's important for me to include this. I always remember that when my father was dying of lung cancer, one of his clients called, and I answered the phone, and I had to tell him that my father was closing down his business and wouldn't be working anymore because he was in the process of dying. And this wonderful man, he had the most mellifluous voice. I never met him, but he gave me such a gift. He said, be sure to look for the jewels in this dark time. Look for the jewels glimmering in the dark. And that was such an important teaching for me, because just being able to midwife my father through that time with my brother, we did that together. There was so much laughter and joy and preciousness in that time. We laughed a lot. I remember leaning over my dad and saying, my brother was there too, Dad, would you like me to sing to you? And he looked up at me and said, no, thanks. My brother and I laughed a lot. I think what this disembodied voice meant is that it's so important not to get so weighed down by sadness and sorrow that we overlook the joy and intimacy that might be hidden in very difficult situations. That's available to us as well. You may have been through the experience of being with someone who is dying, and when someone you love is dying, all the things about them stand out in sharp relief and become so precious, even those things that annoyed you about them. My father used to say all these little things that annoyed the heck out of me, and now I say those things myself. It's a way for me to keep him in my heart. I realize now a lot of the little things he said to us when we were children were his ability to turn towards humor rather than getting angry. And as a teacher of children, I often use those little expressions of my father's. But these precious things are close at hand always, if we can open up to them. And that guided meditation that I shared with you has many jewels in it. Beginning with the first one, I choose to enjoy this moment, recognizing that we have that choice at any moment, even a difficult moment. To be ready to experience the feelings in our heart. You know, often when we have a troubling feeling, we want to run off and call somebody or eat something or act out in some way or entertain ourselves in some superficial way rather than just staying with the feelings in our heart. There's a saying in Zen, painted cakes don't satisfy. Painted cakes don't satisfy. And if we have some idea in our mind of some ideal place where we can get to, where we're going to be happier, when we're going to get what we want, we're never able to enjoy the cake that's right in front of us, the real cake of this moment. Some of us are very familiar with the insatiability of addiction, but even people who don't identify as addicts can recognize some of the habitual patterns of thought, our automatic negative thinking, the worst case scenario that might spring to mind. We forget that we're choosing to suffer when we think that way. Some of the ways we undermine our own happiness by continuing to behave in ways that are unwholesome or unhealthy. A Buddhist student of mine offered me the most wonderful koan. He asked me this question. He said, why do I do things that I know won't make me feel good and not do things that I know will make me feel good? Isn't that a wonderful question to ask ourselves? Why we eat that whole cake in one sitting rather than taking a walk in the woods with a friend? The Buddhist wheel of life pictures many different realms. There's a beautiful tanka over here. And these Tibetan tankas often picture the 7 different realms. And one of these realms is the realm of the hungry ghosts. And hungry ghosts aren't necessarily dead people. We can be hungry ghosts ourselves. And they're pictured as beings with huge empty stomachs, but they have little pinhole mouths and very thin necks, so thin they can't swallow. So a hungry ghost, this archetype of the hungry ghost, is a metaphor for addiction in the broadest sense of the word. Our tendency to always look outside of ourselves for satisfaction and answers, always looking for new things that are going to satisfy this craving within ourselves. Hungry ghosts are characterized by insatiable hunger and craving, and also associated with addiction and obsession and compulsion. When we constantly seek outside of ourselves to cure our insatiable yearning for relief, for satisfaction, when we constantly seek entertainment or distraction, we're never able to be truly satisfied by the present moment. This is the wonderful thing about sitting practice. We're practicing being satisfied with the present moment. This compulsive busyness that many of us are locked into, it can't give us what we long for, which is connection, a sense of peace, a feeling of belonging in the world. Drugs and alcohol are maybe the closest thing to a spiritual experience that isn't one. It's a kind of a synthetic spiritual experience. But I walked around Stowe Lake the other day and saw so many people sitting on park benches. In front of them was a beautiful scene of trees and birds and blue sky, little clouds scattering across the sky, and this is what they were doing. Person after person, even people walking around the lake, looking at their little phones. Isn't that a metaphor for our culture today? I think one of the diseases of our culture is FOMA. You heard of FOMA, fear of missing out? We might have this feeling that whatever we are, whomever we're with, whatever we're doing, there's something incredible going on just around the corner or in the next block. So rather than resting in this moment or indulging in this experience or fully being present for the person in front of us, we're texting, looking for the next thing. My favorite cartoonist is Roz Chast, and this is her book, The Party After You Left. And on the cover, it's a picture of, she's at a party on the roof of a building in Manhattan. She's just left the party. So this is what's going on after she leaves. I think it's time we serve the really good champagne. and the other bartender says, yeah, I'll pour the rest of this swill into the toilet. This person saying, I have the most scandalous piece of gossip. A woman saying, poor Benicio del Toro, he's standing there all by himself. A guy saying, would anyone here like to try this very, very safe, short-acting, non-addictive, extremely fantastic new drug? And then these people are saying, thank God she's gone. Now we can really have fun. And then in this corner, this guy's yelling, hey, look who just walked in. Yo, Jesus, Buddha, over here. That's FOMA in a nutshell. I read this wonderful study in the New Yorker. It was a study of delayed gratification among children. This was in the 1960s. And they tested these children one by one. They'd let them come into this room with a table, and on the table was a plate with a cookie on it. Maybe some of you have heard of this. And the child was told, didn't know they were being watched through a two-way mirror. If you can just sit here and wait, I'll be right back in about 10 minutes. If you can wait to eat the cookie, you can eat it now if you want, but if you can wait, I'll bring you another cookie. In 10 minutes you could have 2 cookies. And it was fascinating to read how the children dealt with this. Some of them just turned backwards in their chair. One child went under the table. Some children just ate it right away. I love this is me. One of the children it must have been an Oreo because they took the cookie apart and licked the inside and glued it back. That's what I would have done. I wouldn't have lasted 10 minutes for sure. The children who couldn't wait for that second cookie were studied in this longitudinal study, and sure enough, when they grew up, a large percentage of them did have difficulties with impulse control, addiction later in their lives. So this is interesting that at such a young age this might have been predictive. Which kids could have some control over, what Buddhism calls the phenomenon of craving. In a real way, when we sit in silence and stillness on the cushion, we're learning how to be satisfied. We're practicing having few desires. We're enjoying serenity and tranquility, rather than giving into our habitual tendency to run off here and there, seeking stimulation, running away from the feelings in our heart. The Buddha said, I teach about suffering and about an end to suffering. And I love this teaching. I teach about suffering and an end to suffering. In Buddhism, we don't talk about sin. Oh, you're a terrible sinner. We talk about ignorance, and that if we knew better, we wouldn't do these things which cause us so much suffering. And we might say that cultivating happiness is an antidote to suffering. I think some of us associate the word happiness with superficiality, a kind of Hallmark card feeling. We might even feel guilty about being happy when there's so much suffering in the world. But many of us have come to practice out of a deep experience of suffering and loss and a deep, gut-wrenching experience of impermanence. That was true in my case. That's what brought me to suffering, this recognition of suffering and impermanence. Turning to practice, stepping onto Buddhist path, we have the opportunity to open to happiness, not a superficial happiness, and not a selfish happiness that we cling to for ourselves, but a happiness that is of benefit to all beings. Thich Nhat Hanh, the great Buddhist teacher and peace activist, I'm sure many of you have studied him. I had the opportunity of practicing with him in his village in Plum Village in France many years ago. You probably know he suffered a very grave stroke. He's recovering from that. He doesn't speak. He's returned to his home temple in Vietnam, practicing there. Thich Nhat Hanh said, if we are peaceful, if we are happy, we can blossom like a flower, and everyone in our family, our entire society, will benefit from our peace. When I'm feeling kind of low, it always helps me to arrive at school and have my third graders run and greet me with their shining faces. And whatever's going on with me goes out the window at that moment. A couple of years ago, I was dealing with a really difficult situation, very painful. And when I got to school that day, a former student of mine, I'll call her Helena, because that's her name, Helena. She was waiting for me at my door. And Helena was so excited to see me. She had this gift for me. And I opened it up, and it was this book called F in Exams, the very best totally wrong test answers. And Helena gave me this book, and I opened it up, and it has some great things in it. These are real answers. This is written by a teacher. Real answers to test questions. So one of them was, what was Sir Isaac Newton famous for? He invented gravity. Is the sun or moon more important? And the student wrote, the moon gives us light at night when we need it. And the sun gives us light during the day when we don't need it. Therefore, the moon is more important. What is a cadaver? It's a type of car. And I like this one. What is a fossil? A fossil is the remains of an extinct animal. The older the fossil, the more extinct the animal. Helena gave me this present, and I opened it with her, and she didn't realize that the gift she was giving me was much more important than this book. Connection to another human being. A feeling of being appreciated and recognized. Can you imagine how it felt to have this girl who was in my class 2 years ago see this book and think, Laura would really get a kick out of this, and bring it to me. I felt appreciated and recognized. Humor, very important. And feeling deep in my heart that in teaching children I'm doing meaningful work. Those are all the things that Helena gave me that morning. And beyond that, I knew it made her really happy to see the look on my face and find a perfect present for me. In our practice, in our Sanghas, our Buddhist communities, our recovery communities, we also enact the elements of happiness. And this comes from the research on happiness and some of the books that have come out, for example, by Rick Hansen, that talk about the congruence between current brain science and ancient Buddhist teachings. And these are some of the elements of happiness. Building strong social networks, that's number one. And in countries where people have strong social networks, there's a much higher quotient of happiness in those countries. Taking responsibility for our actions, finding that we have the ability to help others, having an alliance with nature, going frequently into nature, and then sitting and looking at our cell phone. No. Cultivating and expressing gratitude. And this is something we can teach children as well. What made you really grateful today? These terrible things happened at school today, but what are you really grateful for? Feeling that our lives matter. All of these things, and in addition, meditation, especially loving kindness meditation, have been found by research to give rise to a grounded happiness, a kind of satisfaction in our lives, and can help us to have fewer desires, but wholesome desires, and know how to be satisfied. And in recovery, we also remember not to get too hungry, angry, lonely, or tired. That's HALT. That helps anybody. If you find yourself getting too hungry, angry, lonely, or tired, immediately address that. So these are things that can give us real satisfaction rather than the simulated, artificial satisfaction of substance abuse, behavioral addictions, superficial entertainment. Not that we don't need entertainment. I love going to the movies. Compulsive work or compulsive seeking of pleasure. We always have the ability to look for the jewels right before us in our own lives and find some kind of happiness and satisfaction that's available to us right now. We can choose to enjoy this moment. We can be ready to experience the feelings in our heart. We can be open to receive. If we're torn up with bitterness and resentment, looking back on the past, anticipating terrible things that may never happen, we're much more likely to cause suffering to ourselves and others, and much less likely to have few desires, know how to be satisfied, enjoy serenity and tranquility. And always remembering that we don't seek happiness just for ourselves, but for the benefit of all beings. And you know what? I think this is so important in this time of divisiveness and hatefulness that we see. I wish there was real Christianity more visible today. I don't know why people who call themselves Christians quote Leviticus, the Old Testament, instead of the New Testament of love and acceptance, loving your neighbor, visiting those in prison, feeding the homeless. That was Jesus' teaching. So I want to say again these words of Thich Nhat Hanh's: if we are peaceful, if we are happy, we can blossom like a flower. And everyone in our family and our entire society will benefit from our peace. So that's our charge, I think, as practicing people. Thank you so much for your very kind attention. And we have time for discussion. So I'd love to hear whatever might have arisen for you in the course of this talk. Questions, comments. And, one thing you might just share with us is what are the things that bring you happiness, that bring you satisfaction? What are your wholesome desires that lead you in a wholesome and healthy direction in your life? Any gold star in the first person.
Oh, I want that. Well, because it's the summer solstice,
Yes.
Slope Garden Nursery is having a half price or 2-for-1 sale. So I was there yesterday and I was there Friday, stocking up on all these different abundance of flowers. And I'm really looking forward this, as soon as this is over, to go back and start planting these flowers in my garden.
Wonderful.
And really make it sparkle.
Yeah, thank you for
How long does the sale go?
I think I'll be today too.
When you talk about all, I'm thinking all those elements I experienced probably daily. But you also talked about it being too much. And can you give some guidance when you might be feeling the normal presence of these elements becoming too much?
Yeah. Well, these are very human feelings. Hungriness, when we feel hunger, we need to take care of it. For myself, I can get really edgy if I get too hungry. And that's just our body telling us what it needs. On the other end of the spectrum is because we love, if we didn't enjoy eating, we wouldn't eat and then we'd die. So I think there's a reason why food is satisfying and nurturing for us. But then on the other end of the spectrum is too much of that. And I do think that practice gives us kind of heightened sensitivity. And halt means stop, right? So if I'm angry, rather than just acting out, I can stop, I can take some deep breaths, I can call someone else in my Sangha, I can put things in perspective, just looking at the sky or looking at the ground and feeling grounded. If I'm angry at another person, I can say, I really can't talk about this right now. Could we talk about it another time? I think one of the great blessings of practice is it gives us the freedom of restraint. During the 60s, I thought freedom was doing whatever you wanted and not caring about the consequences, Now I feel that freedom is not having to do whatever I want. So when we're angry, to take a moment to pause and take a breath and evaluate, if I say something right now, is it going to be something I'm going to apologize for later? So in practice we have this, Robert Thurman calls it the radical dharma freedom when presented with a choice, rather than behaving instinctively, to turn in the appropriate direction. He says meditation isn't just about sitting on the cushion, it's about what you do when you get up. So a real, I think, monitor of our practice is how we deal with anger. And do we notice it when it's coming up before it overwhelms us? Now, loneliness is something that we don't necessarily feel when we're alone. I think it's a great gift to enjoy solitude and to be able to be alone and enjoy our own company. But I notice that if I'm feeling lonely, if I turn my attention to another person, that loneliness is forgotten. Here's a wonderful story. There was a very wonderful man in Alcoholics Anonymous, and he's since died, but he... is our friend okay here? He was terribly burned in an accident, and he was in the hospital. And a nurse who was also in AA, he didn't know that, by the way, till later. She came to him and said, there's a young man here who was burned in a motorcycle accident. He really needs to talk to you. And so the young man came, and these two men talked, the older man, the younger man. And this man that I'm speaking of, his name was Sai, he said, can you imagine anything more painful than being a burn victim? I said that to a little girl in my class who burned herself. I said, they say that a burn is the most painful thing. She goes, I disagree with that. I think it's a broken heart. 8 years old. So we talked about that. But to get back to Sai, he said when he was talking to this other man, he forgot completely about his own pain. It literally disappeared. Well, years later, this young man and Sai came across each other at a meeting in Sacramento. And the young man told Sai, do you remember when we were in the hospital? Did you know that that nurse was in AA? She told me, there's an older man here who really needs to speak to you. So it's sort of like matchmaking. She told him, this old man needs to speak to you. She told Sai, this young man really needs to speak to you. And in coming together, their pain was relieved. So this is something that we do need other people. We do need to ease our loneliness in the company of others. And often helping others, can be a way to relieve our own loneliness. And then if you're tired, take a nap. I'm a great napper. So to keep those things in mind and to have the sensitivity to address them before they become overwhelming is a practice in itself. And it's called self-care, something we can really ignore in our hurried up age with the demands on our time. Thank you. Is that helpful?
Yes, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
I just really appreciate what you said about knowing how to be satisfied and impulse control, the cookie story. That's really being satisfied with what is excruciating and pleasant too, depending on the moment.
Yeah, and that's something we can just call to mind. Can I be satisfied with what's here right now? What's causing my dissatisfaction? Can I turn towards this moment and enjoy it? I had a dream when I was little that Jesus came to me and said, be a good girl, Laura, and don't eat too many cookies. It didn't stop me from eating too many cookies. Yes?
I'm fascinated by the question that you brought up. Why do we do the things that we know are going to cause us pain, and why do we not do the things that we know are going to make us feel good?
Mm-hmm.
And I was just speaking to my sister, one of my sisters this morning. we were asking that question and saying, is it nature or nurture? Like, was it mom? Or was it we were born this way. And it's a fascinating question. I wish there was an answer and a drug or something. I love yoga. I never go to yoga. I have a brand new bicycle, not brand new, but I've had it for a while. And the other day I was listening to a BBC Outlook podcast about this bedridden grandma who started to get out of bed and dance with a broom and to music in her living room or whatever in her home. And she started doing it more often and more often, and she got out of bed, and then now she has like 200 people that gather in front of her home, and she leads them in this like song. And it's people who came out of wheelchairs and a stroke victim who regained speech and everything, got back to really inspirational. So after hearing that, I got on my bicycle, and I rode to the Golden Gate Bridge. It was a spectacular day. It was so great. I felt so good. And the next day I thought, get back on your bike. And then the social thing, like a friend and I went for a long walk. We call it the Russian Hills Walk, where we just go up and down the Russian hills and the views and homes and beauty parks. One day I'll go and I'll just think it's so spectacular, and the next day I just refuse to get out the door. It's fascinating.
It is, and I don't know that there's an answer to that question. I love how Rilke said, make friends with the questions in your heart. Gertrude Stein said, there ain't no answer, there ain't never been no answer, ain't gonna be no answer, that's the answer. But Rilke says, keep asking the question, And I think if we this is what I love about Buddhism, it's an investigation, it is a scientific experiment. Well, how do I feel when I do that? How do I feel when I do that? When I tell a lie, it makes me nervous. When I do something dishonest, I don't feel good. And that to me is more helpful than, oh, that's a sin, you're going to go to hell. I know Frank McCourt felt like he was a little kid, he'd already committed so many sins, he might as well keep doing it because he's going to go to hell anyway. Yes, Jason.
So I have a couple of reflections. One to this question of you that I have I do coaching work, And one thing I've noticed is I think there's a lot about our nervous systems, and we get really caught in patterns. And I think having someone there to help provide you a different alternative and to help you find practices to keep shifting your nervous system, I think that's something when we, if we blame it on the mother, right? We got trapped in those childhood patterns. And if we keep going forward with only that perspective, then it's challenged to help the nervous system rewire, which I think you also have in recovery communities too, with the sponsor, right?
Absolutely.
That experience.
You have something else to say, but let me just respond to that. One of the things about this brain research is that we literally do lay down very deep grooves in our brain, these neural pathways. And that's why it's very hard to change those habits and the negative thinking and the negative behavior and the addictive behavior, because it's deeply imprinted in our brain. The good news is that when we can, create new neural pathways by doing new behaviors. This is why a recovery program is usually 28 days. It takes that long to start laying down those new habitual ways of thinking.
And then the other reflection is in regards to this excessiveness, right? I was reading a horoscope. I follow this one woman, this one astrologer, and she gives out these great weekly breakdowns. And one of them was about Michael Jackson's song, Don't Stop Till You Get Enough. And one of the biggest reflections I got from that was that, that we think that song is only about keep going, but he's actually saying don't stop till you get enough. So you have to know when you've gotten enough and when to stop too. Yeah. So that way there's a celebration, I think, in that song of celebrating the go, 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 enjoy it, but also know when you need to stop as well, when you've gotten enough.
Well, that song is a perfect example of there's different ways to look at that, and revolutionizing our perception is a great freedom that we have. Yeah, don't stop till you get enough, but when you get enough, stop. For crying out loud. And if you think about his life, I'm sure he was able to live that. Yeah. Something else before we have cookies?
Regarding the question of why do we do the things we do, the following is not one of the 12 steps. Thoroughly reviewed with our therapist why we do the things we do. It's not one of the 12 steps.
It's very interesting to look at the roots of our behaviors and to know that we can change. To me, that's one of the beauties of impermanence. When I first came to practice, I thought, oh yeah, life is suffering, that's right. And then I realized, well, impermanence isn't just about tooth decay and sickness, old age, and death. It also means that, I think one of the reasons in Japan they celebrate I spent some time with Pico Iyer recently, and his book, Autumn Light, is very beautiful about how in Japan they celebrate the turning of the leaves. I knew about their cherry blossom festivals, but they celebrate the turning of the leaves and the dropping off of the leaves. Well, part of that is they know that in the spring, the leaves will turn green again, and the cherry blossoms will come. He almost feels that in Japan, the seasonal changes is a type of religion. The appreciation and gratitude of impermanence is deeply embedded in Japanese culture. And so we can appreciate impermanence. We can appreciate that there was no such thing as impermanence. My daughter wouldn't have become the beautiful, capable young woman she is today. I wouldn't have recovered from alcoholism. So impermanence it's just a reality, but it's not just one reality. Are we satisfied? Yes.
So I was listening to Grisha's talk about riding the bike the one day and then not, and this is another 12-step thing: progress, not perfection.
Yeah. And
I have come to this all the time because sometimes I don't want to go swimming or I don't want to do something. And something else that kind of is the same thing is when people say, I'm bad because I ate a piece of chocolate cake. I don't believe people are ever bad. They just make choices. And if you stay in bad, you stay in the guilt. And so if you just say, I make choices, there's no guilt to that.
Yeah. I love swimming, and I often don't want to go swimming. And one way I overcome that is, well, how do I feel when I'm swimming? How do I feel after I've gone swimming? I think it's that first moment of getting in the water that I dread, but you know, to think it through to the result is important.
Still trying to find that piece of, eat that piece of chocolate cake, though. It's been 67 years. So. But I don't eat as many.
Yeah. Well, we have to be gentle with ourselves,
Yeah,
too. And have a piece of cake once in a while. Unless we're allergic to it.
Yeah. I'd seen some movies at the friend of mine yesterday, and was thinking yesterday afternoon, what story would I write as a short film? And it drove me back into time, into the 70s, and I fell into this decade and all that was going on, and I just had this astonishing sense of gratitude for the richness of experience at that time, which I don't think about. You know, it's in the past. I'm here now, but I was almost euphoric in the sense of the connections and what was happening then. And then I went to the store, and I passed the liquor store that was selling lottery tickets, $50 million, and I got one. And I justified it with, I'll just start a foundation. Total delusion. I really hope I win. And I have plenty. I'm totally content with what I have, other than a dog. But it was just a quick flip from fullness to, ooh, yeah, 50 million would be nice.
Well, if you win, remember, we're really good friends.
Being a benefit to all beings.
Yeah. Well, going back to Kyrgyzstan, because she fascinates me, and I've read a lot about her and her autobiography. Her last words, I'm sure you know this, is she's dying, and she says, "What's the answer?" And then there's a long, pregnant pause, and she says, "Well, then what's the question?"
All right, well, thank you.
Thank you so much. I so enjoy your
Other announcements? Cass?
I'm the host today, so please stay and enjoy the fellowship of the Sangha. There's no chocolate cake, but there are vegan cookies and fruit, and there's hot water for tea. If you have some tea, put your cup in the sink, and we'll take care of washing it. I'll be coming around with a dharma bowl, an opportunity to overindulge in generosity. And I guess a suggested donation of $10 to help us meet the expenses of our group. At 12:30, some people gather at the front door to go to lunch, and anybody's welcome to join.
I'd like to say, too, that I do lead this meditation group in Oakland for Buddhism in Recovery. If any of you are interested in that or know somebody who might be, maybe someone who lives near Lake Merritt, I'll leave this flyer in the other room.
Yeah, I just want to remind everyone, we have an account at Community Thrift, and we get between $200 and $400 a quarter. It's a great way to support the Sangha. So if you have something you don't need anymore, you might consider taking it there. Just be sure to tell them it's with GDF, and that's how we get our bit of the proceeds.
I'm going to do that. I'm about to do this massive...
I actually, a friend of mine's father died, and after I condoled, I said, you know, seriously, I really encourage you to think big, like you have friends and you go to an apartment, but you really got to get rid of some of this shit.
Oh, that's great. Thank you for that.
It's easy to drop off too.
Yes, just check their website because they have a lot of things they do and don't take, and it isn't entirely obvious. So, but it'd be a real help to the Sangha.
Good to know.
Okay. Next week?
There's another...
Oh, sorry.
This is just a recommendation for any of you who are under-entertained. there's an HBO series called Gentleman Jack about a lesbian in provincial England in the 1830s, and she had a voluminous diary, and she was an extraordinary woman, very brave, in a provincial, tight-minded society, but she wore a top hat. She acted as a man, but was still a woman, and all on her own. No theory, no nothing in support of her being. But she would, and the depiction is just this enormous life force. It's just riveting, and it's a beautiful production as well. And there are only eight chapters to it, and I'm on a free week with HBO, so I have to hustle home and finish it. So I don't have to. But it's astonishingly good. Gentleman Jack.
All right. Next week, Donald Rothberg, PhD, has practiced insight meditation since 1976 and has also received training in Tibetan Dogen and Malamudra. He's going to hate me for that pronunciation. Practice the Hakomi approach to body-based psychotherapy and trauma work. He regularly teaches insight and loving-kindness meditation and on transforming the judgmental mind, mindful communication and wise speech, working skillfully with conflict, and socially engaged Buddhism. He is the author of The Engaged Spiritual Life, a Buddhist approach to transforming ourselves and the world. That's June 30th.
And I'll be back on July 28th to continue this theme.
All right. Shall we?
Let's do it. Deeply.
Lord, do you have a special dedication, or shall I read that?
I'd be happy to do it.
Okay.
We stand together in realization that we can do together what we can't do alone. We offer our practice to all beings in the 10 directions, past, present, and future. May all beings be happy. May they be joyous and live in safety. May we be happy. May we be joyous and live in safety for the benefit of all beings. Keep coming back, it works.
Thank you for listening to the Gay Buddhist Forum. If you would like to hear several new talks per month and be notified of upcoming speakers so you can participate live, please subscribe to this podcast, like us on Facebook, and join our mailing list by visiting gaybuddhist.org.